So let's go back now and talk about those people who really do own the company. Oh, wait, what's the title of the slide? It says shareholders, not share owners. Shareholders has become a term in vogue because it supposedly captures the fact that a lot of people hold shares, but they don't really consider themselves owners of the company. It's not that they believe in the company, its mission, its product, anything like that. They simply see it as an investment vehicle that's going to go up in value, and when it does, they're going to exit. And let's face it, that's why I own stocks. I own two particular stocks, or individual stocks, and I invested in them because I thought they were going to go up in value. And the thing that complicates this whole debate about the role of the ownership is the fact that ownership in most U.S. companies is very dilute. If you go and check out through various means the concentration of ownership, you will see that it's very common that a single entity will the largest single entity of ownership will only own 3 or 4% of the company, and that entity will be someone like Vanguard or Fidelity, where they have it in mutual funds. So the ownership is very diluted. When I was a young person, I'd get those proxy cards and those sorts of things, and I would vote that stuff because I'm participating in the management of this company. And then I figured out my vote doesn't matter. I don't have enough of a voice on these issues, and I don't really know what they're talking about. So I don't do that stuff anymore, which is to say, the only way I endorse or unendorse a company is when I buy or sell their stock. Because other than that, I'm completely inactive, and that's typical of a very unconcentrated ownership pool. And so then take my perspective. Hey, I'd be happy to buy a stock, have it go up, double, triple in 6 months and sell it. So I have a very short, as an investor, a very short time horizon, whereas maybe a longer time horizon is required to be fair to the company. And then you get the idea of activist investors. And we're going to see that a lot in our class discussions. And you just see it a lot today, where investors buy a stake in the company and then they are very vocal. So at Independence, the one at the bottom of the slide is the independents. These are the T. Boone Pickens and the Carl Icahns, but there's a lot of other entities that buy sometimes relatively big stakes, but sometimes relatively small stakes, and they're very vocal in telling the company leadership what they think it should do. So then the mutual fund companies are put into a bit of a quandary now. The Fidelities and Vanguards of the world, what do? So if you look at the Dell buyout decision, I'm sorry, not the buyout, but the Dell go private decision in the fall of 2013, that came down to the way a lot of mutual funds voted their stock as to what Dell could do, because the mutual funds were the major holder. And so when you buy Vanguard or Fidelity or whichever funds you buy, have you ever thought about the fact that you're empowering them to vote your shares? And that puts a lot of corporate control responsibilities into their hands. Beyond activist investors, which you see a lot of today, a lot of activism in the investment, there are other control mechanisms. People that can significantly affect how a company does or doesn't do business. There's the idea of the unsolicited buyout offer. Several years ago, Kraft Foods bought Cadbury. It was a hostile takeover move. They didn't want it, but hey, they got it. And you can see today, as I make this video, Joseph A. Banks has made a play to buy Men's Wearhouse. Men's Wearhouse doesn't want to do it. So they're trying to go through some steps to make that acquisition untenable. But even beyond that, the media has influence. Shortly after Steve Jobs died, who tended not to pay a lot of attention to worker conditions, the media focused on the working conditions in the Foxconn factories in China. And Tim Cook, the Apple CEO, actually made a trip to the factories and said, basically, you've got to do better. Well, a lot of that was pressure generated by the media. Analysts can generate pressure. They can say, well, if so-and-so doesn't do such and such, we're going to downgrade the stock to a sell. If a company's having a funding issue, they don't want a bunch of people selling their stock, driving their stock price down, because that may hamper their ability to raise money through other channels. So there are lots of other people that play in this market for corporate control as well, which goes back to, as a CEO, you have to manage the expectations and opinions of a lot of people, or they're going to be in your chili. I want to take a brief trip internationally because the boards look different in different countries. When you look to Asia, they tend to be very consensus based and more institutionally owned. For example, in Japan, the banks own large blocks of the stock in the various companies, and they tend to be very consensual in their decision making, which makes it look like nothing big ever changes because it does move very slowly. Some activists have bought some shares in Japan and been very disappointed because they can't get the results that they can in the United States. Another form is in Germany, which has a two-level board structure, and on one level of the board they have workers, unions, communities, and so you can see they really give those stakeholders a big voice on the board of directors, which some can say slows decision making and in the long term may make decisions that are not in the financial best interest of the owners. Not sure, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it just is what it is. So not everybody does it the same as the United States does. But when you take it back to our discussion of governance, what you want is a structure so that when the senior leadership team makes decisions, the company implements those decisions. But by the same token, you want to have a system where the corporate company leadership is held accountable to the various stakeholders, especially the owners. It really sounds clean and easy. In practice, it's actually very complicated, and that's what we're going to see in our discussions in class. See you then.